Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on the customer propensity model that we have created in order to identify a new customer segment to target for the new line of credit offering. My name is Brenna McCallick, and I'm joined by my partner, Justin Dundas-Smith. So let's go ahead and get started. So essentially the goals of building this model and conducting the data analysis that we did were several. We most importantly want to identify new customers who are most likely to accept this new product offering. We want to be able to provide those insights to both the banking team and the marketing team on these new campaign targets. But also we want to be able to provide just in general a clearer picture of our historic customers as well as prospective customers in ways that can be utilized going forward. So summary of what we're going to go over today. We'll first talk through our approach to the data analysis we conducted as well as the models that we built and applied. We'll talk through some of the highlights of the historic customer data that we evaluated. We'll talk through the models that we tested and built in order to predict this future customer segment that we're going to target. We'll talk through how we compared model accuracy and how we selected the model that we ultimately ended up using. And then we'll give a little bit of information about these prospective customers that we recommend should be targeted. And so just to go over the approach and kind of the steps involved in this process of new customer discovery, essentially we took historic data on 4,000 customers that we already had, added supplemental data to that to really enrich it and give us a more nuanced view of different characteristics that the customers had. And that allowed us to kind of create a detailed profile. We segmented that data by those who accepted previous offers of lines of credit so that we could really start to target people who are most likely to accept an offer. We then identified the prominent shared traits among these offer acceptors from historic targets. We then built a model that learns from this data. So we applied different models to the data to learn about these traits that are contributing to people accepting or not accepting an offer. We then applied the model to the prospective customer list, and that allowed us to identify top 100 candidates that we recommend targeting for the new campaign.
We started our analysis focusing on the existing customer base to determine whether or not we could definitively describe a typical set of traits for a customer who'd be more likely to accept an offer, such as the new product that we're taking to market. This table was created by a random forest analysis of the customer base to determine the importance of various aspects of the customer in relation to whether or not they would accept. We'll be talking more about random forest and what the method entails later in this presentation. But for now, this table gives us an indication of what traits are important to the outcome of acceptance. The different columns represent the different but complementary ways of determining importance. Basically, the larger the number, the more important the variable is in determining the likelihood of acceptance. Analyzing some of these variables further, we wanted to compare the number of customers who accepted, represented by the green bars, and the rate at which they accepted, represented by the black line. For example, we can see in this age graph that the majority of acceptances were from customers aged between 20 and 60. The rate of acceptance, however, was significantly higher for those customers aged 60 and over. So why the discrepancy? Looking at the overall age statistics of the bank customers, the number of clients significantly drop off after the age of 60. Those over 60 who remained with the bank took up the new products when offered. If only we had more customers over the age of 60. Another interesting pattern that we find is that the rate of acceptances significantly increases near the end of the year in the lead up to Christmas. The number of acceptances, however, is low. Looking at the data, we can see that past campaigns and phone calls occurred in the middle of the year. We might want to look at the timing of this campaign going forward. So in summary, we have a few takeaway points from this slide. Those who responded positively to campaigns in the past have responded positively to recent campaigns. Campaigns and phone calls at the end of the year are more successful, leading to a suggestion of timing for this campaign. Those over age 60 are more likely to accept, indicating that another campaign focusing on enlarging the over 60 customer base might have some good return on investment.
So looking at a few other characteristics of these past customers who have accepted our offers, there's some other dynamics we wanted to bring to the fore. We see that very few people across both male and female segments have any defaults on their records. So these are generally people in good, somewhat good financial standing, depending on various other factors. I also thought it would be interesting to look at some of the dimensions of cars of past customers, considering this is a loan product based on used cars. And we see that the vast majority of cars owned by these past customers were created after about 1992, which is probably not that important of an insight, given that this is actually very reflective of the total customers overall, not just those who accept. It might just reflect existing cars that are out there. But still something interesting to kind of think through as we think about targeting future customers. Generally don't want to go older than about 30 years. So looking at some of the most popular car makers, we see that 4 of the top 5 car makers among these customers who have accepted offers in the past were American-made cars. So we see Chevrolet, Ford, Dodge, GMC, with Toyota coming in there at number 4. So also something to think about as I try to identify future customers.
We now have a better understanding of the type of customer more likely to want our product, but what is the profile of the customer to who we wish to offer the product? Just unpacking a little bit what Brenna was saying, we looked at the default rates at a high level to see if there'd be any merit in further analysis. If there was a concern that those over 60 would default to a greater extent than other ages, then the data just doesn't seem to support that idea. It could be that we require more data from those over 60, but it appears that those in their early 20s default at a greater rate. Occupation type has a moderate correlation on default rates. I think the takeaway from this high-level analysis is that it might be worthwhile repeating this prediction exercise, focusing on predicting defaults. We could then focus our campaign on the intersection of those likely to accept and those likely to not default. For both ethical and regulatory compliance reasons, I need to briefly describe the methods that we employed to predict the numbers who would be more likely to accept. At the very minimum, we need to understand why the algorithm selected the customers that they selected. I won't use technical jargon here, I'll keep it conceptual, but it is important. There are 4 methods that we use to find the most accurate prediction model. The top one, the classification tree, takes a set of training data and divides the population up into branches according to different customer traits and values. For example, at the top of the tree, we may have 1,000 people who accepted and 1,000 people who rejected in our training data. If we were to divide the population up into 2 branches, those over 60 and those under 60, we might then have 800 people accepted on the left branch and 200 people who accepted on the right branch. We can then make further branches such as those who accepted from previous campaigns, and again, the population is divided. We continue doing this until some polarities at the leaves or nodes of the tree, and we can then take our prospect and match them up against these branches. Is our new prospect over 60 or under 60? Did they accept from a previous campaign or not? When they land in the end node, if the majority of customers from the training data in that node accepted, then we predict our new prospect will accept. The second one, KNN, or K nearest neighbor. Imagine we have an X and Y axis. X represents, for example, age, and Y represents the model of car. We then plot our existing customer base according to these axes. We then take our new prospect and plot them. We look at their nearest neighbors, let's say 7 nearest neighbors. And if the majority of them accepted, then we predict our new prospect will accept. Now the 2 axes can actually be expanded to 3 axes, and we're now plotting in 3D space, or in fact, many more dimensions, such as 20 dimensions, representing 20 different traits of existing customers. My computer has no difficulty plotting that. The third one, logistic regression, is similar in that we plot existing customers in multidimensional space, but we then try to find a trend line that consists of the variables multiplied by coefficients. So once we find a set of coefficients that when multiplied by the different traits of the customer variables, and it represents a relatively accurate trend, we can then calculate whether or not a new prospect will accept by multiplying their variables or traits by those same coefficient values. And finally, the random forest is similar to the classification tree, except that it generates many smaller trees. The trees are not as detailed, but divide using different combinations of variables. When we then put our prospects' variables into each of the trees then, in effect, vote on whether or not they think the customer will accept. Excuse me. We then did a comparison of the accuracy of each of the methods. That is, how many times do we accurately predict accept and correctly predict reject on a validation set of data? Accuracy rates are quite similar, with random forest and KNN slightly above the rest. The column all is recognizing that one of the first questions we normally get is, what if we had all of the methods vote on the probable outcome of each prospect? You can see that accuracy is actually slightly reduced. And this is because the intersection of all methods is actually too conservative and misses a lot of customers who would normally accept. This slide shows the nuances of accuracy, which is really important when we want to know which method produces the best list of prospects to call. You can see that all misses the most acceptors. That is, it predicted that customers in the validation data would reject, but in fact they accepted. This is a very bad thing when we want to maximize the uptake of our new product. The two most interesting methods here, I think, are KNN and random forest. Random forest is probably the more optimistic of the two methods, having correctly identified the most acceptors. It is at a slight cost of falsely identifying some acceptors. That is, it predicted acceptance when in fact the validating customer rejected. I think this is actually okay, as we don't want to pre-qualify the customers too much. It'd be much better to phone a customer who rejects than not to phone a customer who would have accepted.
So looking at applying these models, and in particular, this is a look at the results from random forest, we can see who we've identified and kind of drill down on a few of the characteristics of the top 100 prospects that the model found. And so these top 100 individuals had at least an 80% likelihood of accepting based on the model. And when we compare some of these traits to past acceptances, we actually see some similarities, which I think speaks to the strength of the model and its ability to predict. So if we look at occupation, for example, we see that the same types of jobs are popular among these prospective customers, people in management fields, administration, blue-collar jobs, as well as when we look at education, we see quite clearly that the education levels fall along very similar lines in both groups. And we wanted to be able to provide a more detailed look at these customer segments. And what we've created here are bouquet plots, which essentially provide dynamic looks at different traits of these two groups. And so you'll see that they're fairly similar. Just at first glance, we see that looking at recent balances, for example, the vast majority of people who've accepted offers in the past don't have a balance above $10,000. And we see that among the top 100 prospects, the chart doesn't even go to 10,000. So we're targeting the right segment just on that basis. And the age distribution is similar across both. But so if you go to one of these bouquet plots, you'll be able to see that when you actually hover your mouse over some of these, each dot represents an individual customer, and when you hover over, you get a look at some of their additional traits. So we hope that this is a useful way of exploring the customer segment.
So just wrapping up, we have a couple of different recommendations here. First of all, we do have the list of prospects provided as an outcome of this analysis taken from the random forest method, as Brenna just mentioned. We have some other recommendations to maximize the effectiveness of this campaign and some recommendations to maximize future campaigns. So first of all, hold the campaign near the end of the year for improved rates of acceptance. Also, if you can get feedback from the results of this campaign, we can further refine our prediction model and improve the accuracy for future campaigns by feeding it back into the learning model. Understanding the nature of the campaigns or products in the past and future might also help us understand the nuances for prediction. For example, if the product is a loan against a car or a personal loan or a loan against a hedge fund or house and so forth, some customers might be more open to accepting some products over others. Independently of this campaign, maybe run a campaign targeting those over 60, not to sell to your existing customer base, but to grow the existing customer base of those over 60. These customers seem to be more willing to accept new products, but we just don't have many of them. And finally, maybe run a prediction analysis like this one, but at defaulting customers to match those who would accept a new product to those who we would want to offer a new product. There is a caution here in terms of ethics that we should discuss before we undertake that exercise. That concludes our presentation. We wish all involved in the new campaign the best of luck and look forward to hearing how it went. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.